Welcome to Tech Talks. I'm Holly Scott. I have the pleasure of chatting today with Desmond Adler, the president of cardiovascular at Gentuity. Good morning, Desmond.
Good morning, Holly. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. It's definitely a pleasure to have you after all these years.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the magic of Gentuity and what you're doing over there, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. You know, everyone who follows our organization knows that we focus in med tech and health tech, life sciences, and there's always an angle that is of curiosity on career and how you landed where you're at. So could you give us a little color and context on your experience and what brought you to Gentuity?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So I guess in a nutshell, I would say I took a fairly conventional, technical track through my career to get to where I currently am. I'm originally from Canada, from a town near Edmonton, Alberta, which is the kind of northwestern bit of the country. Did engineering in undergraduate, right? Double E, and was really interested in optics and photonics, and at the time, telecom. Right, that was kind of like where you went if you were into those kinds of things. So spent a couple of years after my undergraduate working in telecom. And, I would say now I had the fortune to live through the whole telecom boom and bust cycle in the late 90s, early 2000s. And going through that, early in your career, it kind of, forces you to think about what do you really want to do? Right, and challenge your assumptions about, I thought I wanted X, right, but perhaps really I don't. So I went through that myself in the early 2000s and realized, the difference that I'm making with my career in telecom, fundamentally, right, it's making people's download speeds faster. So they can pirate music more aggressively, right? This was like back in the yellow Napster days. And I'm like, maybe there's more to life than this. So made the decision to get into medical technology, right? And in order to do that effectively, realized I had to go to graduate school. That's kind of what one has to do. So through that kind of mental process, kind of found MIT, right? Found a really great program at MIT that was doing medical imaging technologies, using optics and photonics, a lot like what we used in telecom, right? But applied for imaging. Fell in love with it, right? That technology was called optical coherence tomography, OCT, which we'll talk a lot more about today, I know. Sure. And then kind of got into, post-PhD, progressively challenging and broad technical roles at companies like Light Lab Imaging, which became St. Jude Medical through acquisition, which became eventually Abbott through acquisition. Left St. Jude in 2015 for something totally different, right? I think also many of us in the technical realm at some point in our careers, you've done kind of the same thing, right, for a number of years, and you want a new challenge. You want something that's really divergent from what you've done in the past. So I had the chance to go work at a small company called Avidro, which was a Boston-based startup that I think you know well. This was, a really, really unique drug device combination therapy, right? So it wasn't imaging, it wasn't OCT, right? It wasn't cardiology, it was ophthalmology. And that was leveraging, elements of optics and photonics, but also pharmaceuticals to treat patients who have rare corneal diseases where your cornea at the front of your eye becomes progressively thinner and weaker, right? Awful disease. It's called keratoconus. And luckily it's quite rare, but it does cause you to lose your vision and functionally become blind in many cases. And this can occur very quickly, and it can occur in very young people in their 20s, 30s, teens in some cases. And that was just a great experience, right? Was there for 7 years. Through that process, saw the kind of typical startup roller coaster, right? So we saw, kind of bringing in new funding. We saw an FDA approval and launch. We saw an IPO, right? We saw an acquisition in 2019 by Glaukos, which is a medium-sized med device pharma company out of California. And through that process, came to experience general management and what that looked like and how that was kind of different from technical roles. And yeah, I eventually found myself back here at Gentuity. So that's been my trajectory and pathway. And I've been very, very fortunate.
Wow. So the field of OCT imaging optics, that's been inbred in you since academics. Then it sounds like it was in early engineering, and
It
followed
was.
you throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I have been fortunate to find something like an anchor like that, right, where I have a personal interest and, multiple decades of personal interest that's been able to stay with me, right, as I've changed in roles and responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been actually very, very beneficial.
I would attest to that. That clear, fundamental, like you said, an anchor, that's something you can pull back to and hold on to, and that you really care about, tends to help people guide them career-wise. And when they say, "Gee, I'm not sure how I ended up in this organization or leading this company or in this president role," or it tends to come back to something that fundamentally you've become passionate about and by way of experience a subject matter expert in. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that common thread,
Yeah.
right, that runs through your different jobs over time.
Exactly. And your role is interesting because although you grew up through engineering, you really have taken on more commercial responsibility and more leadership over businesses and moving product from idea through development and pushing out and globalization and such. And I just wanted your perspective on that. Was that intentional, or was that something that you followed product, or you followed your fundamental base of the interests that you had, or someone mentored you? Tell us about that crossover.
Yeah. So I'll talk about mentorship. That's really important. And then also the kind of intentionality of it. So I think, yeah, was it intentional? It wasn't like I had this like super defined goal. Like I want to have a certain kind of job, like at a certain point in my career. Not at all. I know some people do have that, and I congratulate them for having the kind of clarity to think that way. With me, it was more following impact, if you will. And I think what you realize as you go through, young engineer to kind of mid-career engineer, you reach a point where your ability to have impact personally is constrained, right,
Mm-hmm.
by being in that pure technical role.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I can have a really cool idea, right? And I can design the thing. I can lead a team maybe of engineers to develop the product. But if my goal is to maximize, my impact kind of on the world, right, and really get these products into the hands of physicians and be impacting patient care, I've got to become broader, right? Because what I can do with my number of hours in the day and in the week really hits the ceiling, right? When you're doing the development work. So I was more chasing that. It was more like, how can I find ways to apply, my knowledge and my skills, and how can I elevate others,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how can I build these teams and lead them to actually not just have the idea or develop the idea, but really launch it, commercialize it, drive adoption of it, right? That's really how you have impact. And I think that's what I was chasing throughout my career. And then on mentorship, that's such a fantastic question. I have been super, super fortunate to have people who I've been able to look to as mentors or guide stars or templates, right, of how to do things well. Going all the way back to graduate school, or even before then, I'd say. And I would highly recommend to folks out there, whatever kind of role you're in, right, whatever field of specialty you're in, like find individuals who have walked the road before you, right, who are often very happy to share with you. You just ask the question.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. It's funny, the more mature individuals get in life, their impact goals change, just like you went from an engineer designing a product to a leader who wanted to impact in a much more broad way. And mentors become mentors, and they like to take on mentorees because they want to make an impact in a different way. You get to a point in your career where that becomes really important. So it's bidirectional. It provides mutual impact for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
We've seen that same sentiment in terms of moving from engineering into leadership and making a bigger impact on the clinical side. Individuals that will move from the bedside or from patient care, whether they're doctors or nurses. I see this in industry all the time. And the number one question they're asked is, how could you leave the patient side? It's like, look, I can make an impact over thousands or millions of individuals taking on this role and do it in a different way. So it's not leaving the patient, it's not leaving the end user, it's making an impact in a different way.
Absolutely. It's the exact same thing, right? I mean, like, I'm a doctor, right? I can treat whatever, like 10 or 20 or 30 patients per day. Mm-hmm. And that's got a cap on it.
That's right.
Right? It's yep, same mentality.
Certainly is. And yeah, it's kind of a nice segue into all that's special about Gentuity, because you think about where you started in OCT and where you are now and the road that you've taken. Tell us a little bit about the clinical value of Gentuity. What is Gentuity? What's the magic, and where are we in the journey?
No, super excited to talk about that. I mean, it is truly a unique company, and it's a unique technology. So what we're about clinically, our objective is to help our physician customers, right, who are interventional cardiologists. We want to help them treat their patients more effectively, more efficiently, the first time, right? So if you think about the kinds of clinical scenarios we operate in, it's typically people who, are having chest pain, right? They've maybe had a heart attack. They have coronary artery disease, right? Which is narrowing or stenosis or blockage of the coronary vessels that feed your heart with blood, right? And as you can imagine, if you're that kind of patient in that kind of a situation, this is a serious life-threatening condition, right? You want to know that your doctor is doing everything possible, right, to treat you appropriately and correctly the first time. You don't want to be a repeat customer, right? And we want to help them do that. So if you think about that situation of having, a narrowed coronary artery, the doctor is going to go in, right, with a catheterization procedure. They're going to want to restore flow in that artery. They want to open it up, right? Almost always what that involves is putting in a stent. Mm-hmm. And we've all heard that term, right? Stenting. It's really a go-to tool these days. If you're going to put a stent in someone's coronary, you're dealing with a vessel that's like 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters in diameter. It's tiny, right? And you need to understand, like, okay, what am I dealing with? Exactly how tight is the blockage? Exactly where is it? What's it composed of? Because that matters. Like, is it kind of a liquidy fat? Is it really tough and fibrotic? Is it calcium? Because that's a whole other kind of issue. How do I make my treatment plan for this patient? And then I'm going to go and execute the plan, right? Put the stent in. Well, now I want to check my work, right? So did I do what I wanted to do? Did I get the outcome that I wanted to have with this patient? And can the person go home, right? Or do I have to do more work, right, to kind of get the optimal result? And that's really where Gentuity's high frequency OCT, right, HFOCT comes in, right? So it's a imaging technology. Think of it like a super high resolution microscope, right? Laser microscope on the end of an optical fiber that's about the size of a human hair, right? It's hardly even there. We can go into the coronaries through a very small puncture point in the arm or in the leg, and we can basically map the coronary, right, very, very quickly, 1 second, with very high resolution, minimally invasive, and give the doctor all the data that they need to make the plan, execute the plan, and then check their work.
That's comprehensive. Is it something that fits conveniently into their current workflow? Is this an added step for them? How does it work right now?
Yeah, so it's very much a part of the workflow. There are other ways that people have kind of approached this imaging need in the past that came before us. So luckily, we're not kind of breaking down a new door
Mm-hmm,
as far
mm-hmm.
as integrating imaging in general into the stenting procedure. I think that where the Gentuity team has really kind of gone above and beyond, right, and stood out is attention to detail of all of the kind of small, what you would think of as small parts of the workflow, right, that have historically made it a little bit higher burden on the physician,
Hmm.
right? So we've made the pullback super fast to reduce the amount of contrast fluid they have to inject to clear the blood away to make the image, for example. We've made our catheter interface device kind of conveniently located on the side of the table so that it isn't in the sterile field. You're always worried about sterility with these procedures. You don't want to have bugs getting into the person's blood circulation. Small thing, but it makes them be able to go a little bit faster, right?
Sure.
Time is always of the essence. The software workflows, just really the overall design of the system has been done in a way that thinks about the doctor's kind of daily life, right? We certainly don't want to be in the way. We want to be a part of the workflow.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like that. Yeah, we're able to in medtech stand on history, stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, when they start to pave the way and create these avenues, these open roads for these new technologies. The elegance, though, of Gentuity is the fact that you are protecting time and size, speed, and accuracy. You've got the size of the catheter is astounding.
Oh, it's incredible. It's such a huge part of our platform, and you can think about it almost like, there has been imaging in this application space for many, many years,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've had ultrasound, we've had earlier generations of OCT that came before our HF OCT. And in the US, right, it's not been adopted nearly as much as it should be, right? And we ask ourselves, okay, why, right? Why is that? I think for me, it's been really interesting coming back to this field after being away for 7 years and seeing the shift in physician mentality, right? So it used to be, 10 years ago, right? It was, I'm not totally sure that that this imaging technology is necessary because my patients do okay, right? Back of the envelope. Um, and I don't know that I really need this. That's what they used to say,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we hear, no, I know I should do it, right? I know there's clinical value. I know the patients will do better. I know that I'll make a better plan. I'll have, a better result if I use imaging. But it's been too hard and it's not been reliable enough,
Hmm.
right? I've had a hard time getting what I know I need, right? Especially for that planning step, right? And what we have at Gentuity with HFOCT, it really addresses that issue, right? The catheter is so small, right? And the system is so fast that now for the first time, right, you can actually get what you know you want and need as the physician in an easy way, right? You don't have to work as hard to get the data.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that is just really going to be transformative with how this product is adopted in the US.
Sounds like a really classic case of timing being so critical. I mean, how many innovations have we seen in our lifetime where they may have been a little too soon for it to really take off, right? So now here you are with the market at least being primed to, we know we can do better, where before it was, we don't know if we need it. So what are some of the things that Gentuity has in store in terms of working to make this technology more accessible to the clinicians?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there, right? I mean, one is you can have, a really great product kind of in the lab, right? Or even, you can get your approval, you can kind of go into production. That's all fantastic. You have to be able to reach the customers, right? We are very, very fortunate. We are in partnership with NEPRO Corporation, and we are in fact part of the NEPRO family. So we have a partner globally, right, in the US and Japan and Europe, going into new geographies soon, hopefully, that's able to help us to make it accessible, right? Because as I'm sure you know, working with startups your whole career, um, you've got to have that, right? You've got to have that kind of commercialization partner to help you to really get it out there. And that's really
right.
how you have the impact.
Yeah.
So certainly, working with NEPRO, being part of the NEPRO family for us is super huge, and we're very grateful to be able to have that partnership. I think the other thing we have as far as making it even more accessible beyond the current product, right, is our pipeline. And it wouldn't be 2023 without saying AI. Okay, so
That's right.
I'll say AI. Indeed, everyone is working on AI, including us, right? Of course, we are too. But we think about it maybe a little bit differently than some of the other folks who are in our space, right? In that we want to use it. It's all about helping the physician to make the critical decisions in the context of the immediate case, like the patient on the table in front of them. I need to decide what to do with my therapeutic, right? With my stent or my balloon or whatever else. And we want to be using AI to answer those questions for them very, very practically, right? Very immediately. And we've actually built the core of our system, right, around AI, right? So we're not kind of bolting it on afterwards. We have an AI operating system, and we're going to be using that aggressively to deliver, new abilities that will make it, we think, even more accessible.
That's fantastic that's already baked into the system, and it can grow with you. We were chatting about the application and the significance of the market penetration in cardiovascular. I couldn't help but think, based on size and scope, that intelligence could be highly beneficial in pediatrics. Do you have a pediatrics application? Is it something that is being used yet in congenital heart disease or congenital heart defects?
No, not that I'm aware of. The product is really intended for an adult population, and that's where we focus our efforts, because most coronary artery disease tends to happen in older folks. Certainly, with the global diabetes epidemic, right? It can be moving earlier, and it changes the nature of the disease in ways that we think, again, we're pretty well suited to address, because you're going to have tons more calcium, a lot more what they call diffuse disease, where the whole vessel is kind of generally diseased versus a nice little focal lesion. So we're, I think, pretty well suited to help with those kinds of patients.
Oh, there's no shortage of coronary artery disease and those who are going to need that intervention for sure. And the reason I bring up congenital heart is I have a 16-year-old who was born with a heart defect. He's had 3 open heart procedures. He's had 7 cath procedures. I mean, he's doing great. But what I've learned about the process is not only is their vasculature incredibly small, but every single case is so unique. So when you start talking about microcatheters and you start talking about intelligent systems, imagine a circumstance where this kind of imaging modality could offer insight into future procedures for individual patients, So just
for sure. I mean, sky is the limit, right? And it's kind of a good problem to have, right? Where it's like you're trying to understand, okay, which super exciting opportunity do we go after next?
Certainly, exactly. That's the thing. So there was some interesting data that you provided a release on in January regarding a neurovascular application. Again, another incredibly challenging area that's in need of novel innovation. We consider neuro the next frontier from cardiovascular. Curious on your thought there.
Neuro is incredibly interesting. I mean, it is in some ways so similar to the coronaries, because it's a blood vessel, right? And we know what to do with the images. In other ways, the anatomy is so much more challenging. The stakes are even higher. That's if that's believable. Um, and the core that's been built here at Gentuity with the very small catheters and the very fast pullbacks is just super well aligned to going after that application space. So yeah, neuro is very, very exciting for us.
Yeah, I'm excited for that space for us as well, because again, we're seeing how the foundation has been laid. You know, you and I saw the world 15, 20 years ago when neuro was, it was so conservative and it was so
Yes.
cautious. It was so
Yeah.
so challenging to introduce new ideas or potential therapies. However, cardiovascular has laid a lot of that groundwork for
Absolutely.
innovation to have an easier, at least easier conversations, you know, in terms of potential opportunities.
No, totally agree. Totally agree. And it's, you know, I think that the neuro folks are going to benefit a lot from the technologies developed in cardiovascular, right? If the companies in the space can kind of translate them to the specific needs of neuro, because it's not the same, right? It's not the same.
Certainly. No, it's not. Well, you look, Gentuity's well positioned. You know, you've got an incredible technology platform that has application, not only that you're in process of bullishly going after in cardiovascular, but other areas that you and I can figure out in another podcast. We'll keep going. What about general trends? You know, you're an industry veteran now. What are things that you're most excited about in terms of the future?
Oh, wow. Where do you even start? I mean, I think as far as cardiovascular goes, um,
Anything.
yeah, I think we're going to see an increasing proliferation of computational tools, right? There's a lot of work going on at a lot of, you know, really good companies and academic labs on like, how do we extract more clinically actionable information from these rich data sets, right? Like HFOCT, right? CT, MRI, angiography, you know, even ultrasound, right? We've gotten better and better and better at kind of gathering the image data, right? Like what else can we get out of it? So there's a lot of work happening on extracting physiology data, right, from image data and doing computational flow modeling to understand, okay, you know, if you think of the coronary as a pipe, right, pipe carrying blood, maybe the pipe is narrow, right, but how much flow is actually moving through that pipe? And is there sufficient flow to feed the muscle downstream, right, regardless of how bad the pipe might look, right? And therefore, does the patient actually need intervention? Or can I leave them alone, right? It's always best if the patient's okay, doesn't need intervention, don't touch them. Very active right now, and I think it's going to get even more active down the road as these computational tools mature. So that's super exciting. Probably the most exciting thing that I'm following these days in our space, at least.
That's I'm with you there. That the next 10 years, we will see this tech revolution. It will no longer be digital tech. It'll be healthcare, right? Every area of healthcare will be permeated with intelligence and more actionable information. Right now, we've got so much information. We don't quite know what to do with it. The clinicians don't quite know what to do with it. FDA doesn't quite know what to do with it. We're all figuring it out. We're all pioneering this space. But I really do believe, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that'll be the difference. That'll change our reactive healthcare system to much more proactive, much more preventative. Do we really, like you said, do we really need to intervene? Is it really weakening the heart muscle by this extra pump because it's tighter here? Or can he or she manage another 10 years or whatever? You know, there's lots of decisions that are going to be made about this information that'll be impactful.
Well, and layered on top of that too, right, is like the whole cost effectiveness thing, right? So like, you know, if you don't need to treat the patient, it's better for the patient. It's also better for the system.
That's right. That's
because
right.
we need to get the costs under control, right? It's not an option. Central to all of that is, I think, a challenge that many companies face, right? Which is, okay, we know we can do more with the data, right? We know we can help the patient, we can help the system, we can help the physician, all these things. Um, Being able to kind of seamlessly move data from, from point to point, from hospital to processing center and back again, in order to deliver some of the value, right, that we're promising here, we have to figure that out too. And it's just right now, kind of to your point, it's evolving in front of us, right? And we as an industry, together with the healthcare partners, right, have got to figure that out. And how do we protect patient confidentiality and all the patient rights? That's totally essential and not optional. We have to get that right also. But for us to be able to deliver on some of these promises is going to mean we need to sort out how to move data around more efficiently.
Yes, more effective, yeah, more efficiently, with privacy in mind, also, payer in mind, and how's it going to be paid for? There's so many questions. Right? Yeah, so many questions, and so that's why it's a challenge, though, right? That's why it's worthwhile.
That's why it's fun.
That's right. That's why it's fun. Exactly. Well, Desmond, this has been great. I certainly appreciate you making some time for us today and sharing what is magical about Gentuity. And we're thrilled to be in partnership with you on this journey. And thank you so much.
No, Holly, thank you for having us. I really appreciate being here and having this opportunity to talk to you and to your audience here. As you know, a huge part of making a business successful is the people, right? You've got to have the people. And the role that you and your group plays in helping us to succeed is just huge. So thanks for doing what you do to make us succeed.
Thank you for mentioning that. It's the common denominator with every organization. They can tell, they'll say, our biggest challenge right now is maybe raising money or whatever it might be. But the reason they need money is because they need the people. It's always the people have to move the needle in our space. So it's an honor. It truly is to build these organizations. So, and to our audience, we thank you for joining us on Tech Talks. I'm Holly Scott. We'll see you next time.